If you would, please grab a pew Bible and let's turn to page 293. This is the second book of Kings, chapter 5, page 293, and we're introduced to a man's man named Naaman. Naaman is testosterone personified. A mighty warrior, lots of men under his command, countless slaves he has acquired through his conquest, admired by his superiors, and he is so successful that the biblical authors attribute Naaman's military prowess on behalf of his native Aram to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's noteworthy. Naaman is Aramean. He is not Jewish. And yet the God of the Jewish people is referenced in relation to Naaman's accomplishments. However, Naaman suffers an indignity that could prove fatal to his toxic masculinity. He has leprosy. And in biblical times, leprosy, in addition to being the medical problem that it is in still some cases, leprosy carried with it a stigma, which meant lepers would be excluded from their communities and they would lose their status. And to people like Naaman, status is everything. We can draw parallels in our day. We think of, fortunately, how our culture is changing with regard to people who suffer from various ailments like anxiety or depression, or if you think to the 1980s when people who had acquired HIV were ostracized by the majority, and we've even experienced cultural stigmas in our day when it comes to COVID-19. Similarities here with Naaman and his leprosy. Now, the good news for Naaman is that a young Jewish slave girl who works for his wife, a young Jewish slave girl that he acquired somewhere along the way, well, she just happens to mention a possible cure for Naaman. That is noteworthy too. Word of healing, of curing, of salvation comes from a young Jewish girl. One who, and I know this sounds horrible to our 21st century ears, but this young Jewish girl was one who would have been perceived to be the weakest, most insignificant person in Naaman's circle. Now, long story short, because some verses are left out of today's reading, but Naaman goes through all the paperwork of getting a medical referral to visit the prophet. And the king of Israel expresses not a little bit of concern because Naaman is out of network, but eventually Naaman is able to communicate with the prophet Elisha, but not face to face. And this infuriates Naaman because he's used to having people come when he calls. But that doesn't make any difference to Elisha. He is not intimidated by Naaman and sends a mediator instead, which means Naaman ultimately has to swallow his pride and his privilege. Naaman learns through Elisha's messenger that to cure his leprosy, he must wash in the river Jordan 7 times. And again, Naaman is incensed with this prescribed course of treatment. He cannot, for the life of him, understand why he could not be healed by washing in either one of 2 rivers in Syria. This is a part of the story that we really need to pay attention to, and that's because Naaman's question is oftentimes our question. Why can't I live life on my own terms? Why can't I choose the stream, the source of my own healing and wholeness? And maybe most importantly, why is lasting healing found particularly in the streams proclaimed by the prophets of Israel? Now, I think Naaman is one of those figures who would be highly revered in American culture. We'd label him as a self-made man. He's experienced much success, primarily through dominating and defeating others. Okay, let's face it, he's a bully. And as much as we preach to the contrary, our culture reveres bullies, so long as they bully in the ways that we agree with. But Naaman is also the kind of high-profile person our society shames easily as soon as we find something objectionable. And for Naaman, it is leprosy. And in our day, it could be a medical ailment, financial mismanagement, infidelity, and we can come up with any number of situations. This is an inconvenient truth about our culture. We admire strong people, if not enable them, and we put them in positions of authority where they are prone to abuse power. And as soon as we become aware of a person's weakness, we exploit it. And if they fall from grace, this is worse. If and when they fall from grace, our culture offers them no path to restoration, to wholeness, to healing. We cancel them. And that is where the stream of the Judeo-Christian faith, when interpreted correctly, and I know that's a dangerous thing to say, but I'm going to say it. The stream of the Judeo-Christian faith, when it's interpreted correctly, it differs from the cultural streams we navigate to seek what we are tricked into thinking is success. Naaman has been sailing down the wrong stream for so long that when his life is most at risk, he thinks he can rely on his own strength and smarts to make himself better. And here's the problem with that line of thinking. The world does not revolve around Naaman. The world does not revolve around me. And no, the world does not revolve around you either. There comes a time when each of us is faced with the challenge that on our own we cannot overcome. When we encounter our limitations, we say we are concerned more with how others view us, when it's likely the case that we're more worried about the way we view ourselves. We will be tempted, like Naaman, to bully our way through the situations with our reputation, our street smarts, our education, wits, charm, and then our force. We do that to project the image we want others to see, knowing full well it's nothing but a fragile facade. But there is no healing, there is no wholeness in living a lie. Not only that, and I think this is a critical part of the story, Naaman almost walks away from the source of healing precisely when he needs it the most. Naaman almost turns his back on the opportunity to be restored because restoration would not take place on Naaman's terms, but God's terms. Salvation comes when we accept the particular terms of the God who is revealed fully in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. When we wash in the streams of living water, we are restored. And only then can we proclaim, like Naaman, "Now I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel." In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.